Ladies and gentlemen, guys and girls, welcome to the second episode of the Age of Warfare podcast. I'm Centurion Anxious Maximus. On that side is Negate, Aidan, Cordia. As you can see, definitely still not Rasputin. The little inside joke there. And today we are on a special Sunday episode of Age of Warfare. We're going to be talking about the Roman Praetorian Guard. It was a subject suggested last week, so we decided to run with it. So before we get started, as always, Aidan, how are you doing today?
I'm not doing too badly. It was quite a nice day. I had the Reading half marathon, which goes past my flat, so I was able to wave to my friend as he went past. Got a good time. It was sub 2 hours. It was just under 2 hours. It's what 10. Well, I was half a marathon, 10.6 miles, something like that. Yeah, it's pretty good. But yeah, apart from that, I've just been doing well. So fairly normal day, really.
For me, working on my new book and all that, but everything else is pretty normal. Not much to talk about. But what we are going to be talking about is the Praetorian Guard, and to set the scene about the Praetorian Guard. For those who may not know who the Praetorian Guards are, they're like the super elite soldiers of ancient Rome. They're like the ones who protect the bodyguards of the emperor, and they're also the ones who are, the intelligence agents. Some of them are. So, but we're going to be talking about how they influenced the emperor, because we were talking about, and we were hinting at last week that there were some emperors that the Praetorian Guards didn't like, and they actually went on to assassinate. So let's get into a little deeper into that part of the Praetorian Guards.
Right. So first off, give it a good overview. So the way to think of the Praetorian Guard would be to think of the elite unit in your country. So not like a SEAL Team 6 or SAS for us or anything like that. Just think of like the top infantry. So your top Marine unit, or the big red one for the Army in the US. For us, that would be you've got some of your para units as well. For us, again, paras, Marines, the rifles are some of our top units. So they're the top of the top. It's where you would recruit from your special service units. They're the pools of people you recruit from. And that was the core of the Praetorian Guards. They were essentially about a legion of them compared to. So they were still built roughly like a standard Roman legion. And obviously, as Angel said, they had their main duty was to protect the consuls, the officials, things like that. So they had this dual role as the elite battlefield, but at the same time, they did fulfill the roles of your SAS, your SEAL Team 6, and also the Secret Service roles that we've got in both countries. Those roles were filled by them. That was one of their primary things that they're well known for, but they could stand up on a battlefield and be good, and it was that you wanted to be in a Praetorian Guard. Also, cost of living thing. So one of the weird things about the UK, if you live close to London, you get paid more. They literally add you live closer to London, so you get. One of the things about being the Praetorians is they were based in and around Rome. Some of the only troops allowed inside of the capital itself, because legions were not allowed in the city.
Yes, that's correct. That's a good point.
So they got, because obviously Rome being more expensive and you wanted them to be the best, they had that extra pay bump of being where they were and who they were. They got that extra money coming in as well. So it was a sought after position if you were a career military person as well. I mean, it's either you're going to go the route and become a centurion and try and go that route, or you try and get yourself into the Praetorian Guard, which is a similar thing. You see it today in modern militaries of people try and get themselves into a senior NCO ranking. Obviously, you can go officer route, but you get a senior NCO rank in an elite unit, or you'd get yourself up to the NCO ranks, and then you'd go off and join your Secret Service units and things as well. Exactly the same principle as well, which meant that they were, as I was saying, they are deeply involved in the politics of Rome. And as we all know, the politics of Rome was a messy place.
Yes. I just wanted to show you what the shield looks like of a Praetorian. Yeah, if you take a look at the shield over here, that's a Praetorian shield. And another thing you might notice about the Praetorian is that they usually wear the kind of purple, which was very important. Obviously, we all know that the kind of purple represented royalty in ancient Rome. So,
it was this one of those interesting things about dye colours of things. So red shoes in Rome signified royalty, but you get imperial purple, and you get the various different reds, the royal reds. There's the bishop's pink is one that I don't know if people watching would know about, but that's a very specific colour. It's known for the Catholic Church and also Church of England uses the colour as well. So these colours signify very specific things. So why the Praetorian Guard had that different colour, whereas if you get to the legions as well, obviously famously people think of them wearing red. That wasn't actually as common as people think. A lot of the shields ended up red, but the clothing would more often be sort of white, browns and things like that. But you did get red, obviously. But they were different. They were the only people that wore purple. And they were, again, it was a special thing about them. They got to do that as well. Though, one thing that I keep forgetting to look into is, why do they have scorpions on their shield?
Yeah.
Is it
that was a good question. Yeah, because every game I played, including, yes, here we go, Rome Total War.
Yeah.
Here we go. Yeah, they always have scorpions. And I have a theory that because it's funny because the symbol of Rome was always the eagle. But I think the scorpion might represent military might over. Yeah, I think it represents military might. And don't forget there were different legions. You had the rabbit legion. You had the lions.
The bulls. There was a legion with the bull. Yeah.
Yep.
If it isn't just that, I do wonder whether it's possibly got something to do with one of their battle honours was protecting Scipio Africanus, and obviously that's North Africa. And while they weren't quite in Egypt at that point,
right?
There's a connection to Egypt. Egypt obviously has the scorpion as a.
That would make the most sense, right? Because they're not scorpions in the Nile River. So that might represent their influence in the southern parts of the world, the Mediterranean, the southern Mediterranean. That's a good theory.
Yeah, it's. I was wondering actually, if you look at I know this more for British units, but there's certain things if you look at their uniform that are very very specific things, and they hark back to certain times. So, for example, the rifles were they were first formed fighting in the US. Grew out of that, they got a name for themselves. And everyone sharp in the Peninsular Wars, obviously based on a lot of their exploits, but they were obviously one of our elite units, and their symbol was the horn because they were essentially initially scouts and things like that, and they still use that to this day. We've got one of the guards units as well. They have a little, obviously you get all the fancy frogging and stuff on uniforms. They've got a bit that's on the back of their neck for the frogging. One of their famous battles, can't remember which unit and battle it was, but was I think it was in the 1700s, where they used to wear the white wigs as well, and it represents the white wig that they wore when they won that victory. So you get these little symbols that go around. So it wouldn't surprise me if the scorpion is linked to a very specific action that they were involved in.
I think I found that answer. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share a screen here, so give me a minute to do that. And I'm going to read. It says, scorpions had such a bad reputation in antiquity and caused such fear that Greek hoplites placed their images on shields to strengthen the terror of their opponents. Similar, the Praetorians did a similar thing. The personal guard of the Roman Empire. So basically, scorpions represent the fear, and it makes sense because we all fear scorpions. So,
and that also links quite nicely because the Praetorians were around from the Republican era. And as we know, we talked about obviously how the Roman military was created and how it was. Initially, the Roman military used hoplite formation, so it was very heavily influenced by those ideas from Greece as well. Well, they were fighting the Greeks very early on.
Yeah.
So it's just a hangover, really, from those early days, if that's what they had, and then it became that's the symbol as well. And like the horde example for the rifles would be for us.
And to go on a small little tangent, but it makes a little sense. Don't forget, a Roman siege weapon was nicknamed the Scorpion, the Ballista, the Roman Ballista, the Scorpion.
Yeah, one of the best weapons in Age of Empires.
Yep. By the way, in Age of Empires 1 and 2, you could use the Ballista, and it was renamed the Scorpion in Age of Empires 2. They renamed the Scorpion. So, but the funny thing about the Scorpion was that it does more damage to units rather than buildings. It's actually more effective against units than buildings. Now, I'm getting a little technical there. If you ever play the Age of Empires games, there you go.
But that is actually that's quite accurate historically, because it's just a giant bow. You stick a bunch of people in line, and then you hit them with a big arrow. It's going to go through them. A builder is just going to go, oh, look, you shot an arrow at me.
And often Scorpions did so much damage that it didn't just affect one unit; it affected a bunch of units. So it was kind of nicknamed the Army Killer, because it could take out an entire army or an entire battalion of units in just one body of missiles.
Yeah, so it's a standard thing with the Romans as well. It's that symbology coming through again and again, and all of you have to. There are very specific things in the symbols. There's always a meaning behind a lot of the things that they did as well. So the color, what's on their shields as well. There's also as I said, obviously being allowed in because they were the bodyguards as well. There's one of the other military units that was allowed in Rome was the urban cohorts. They were essentially a national guard, but for the city itself. A very specific, a militarized police force, as it were. And there's links. It's actually mentioned on the Wikipedia page as well. There's some of the when they expanded the Praetorians, the evidence looks like when they shrunk it down again, that those units were just made urban cohorts, which would make logical sense because it's only the urban cohorts and the Praetorians that are allowed in there, raising more units and moving soldiers around. Those people were already allowed to do that thing. Therefore, you didn't want to anger the gods, as it were. It's like, you don't want to close the doors on the Temple of Mars.
Right. And a little tidbit, if you notice the upper right corner, the little logo in the upper right corner, that's a Praetorian. The upper right corner
is a Praetorian. Yeah.
Yep. So you like that, we fit into today's topic. Which, I mean, I gotta come up with a logo, but anyway, we've actually find something that fits into today's topic perfectly. So, and so I guess the big question is, how much did the Praetorians actually make? I mean, it's kind of hard to say how much they made, but I do know this much: they were paid more than the average Roman legion for sure. They were able, and I think Praetorians kind of fit into the Equites social class, like we were talking about last week about Roman social classes. I think Praetorians kind of fit into the Equites, and now they had enough wealth compared to our Equites.
It's one of those things of when you think of the modern special forces, you tend to find that there's a lot of recruits that were sergeants that join, and then they go back to sort of a basic rank. But it's with the experience and the way that you go through the military, you get to that rank. So societally, the same thing happens, obviously, with the Romans as well. That the Praetorian legionnaires were that slightly higher class of soldier, and then so they had the higher pay, which then led them socially to be in that class. Also, part of being the social class, as we talked about before, was that you had to do certain things to remain part of that social class. There was things expected of you, of how you lived your life, where you lived, what social circles you're in, who you talk to, and the politics side of it, obviously, which we will definitely get to. Obviously, is how they fit into politics. So even your basic legionnaire would be a well-respected member of the community. Well, if they're a nice person, obviously. If they were not a nice person, people would still show them a lot of respect because they were a Praetorian, and you don't mess with the Praetorians, even if they're not nice to you. So one of the other big things is we've only touched on this a few times. There's something called donatives, and there was a big thing when a Roman emperor came to power. They were expected to essentially give a bonus to the legionnaires, which would be a certain amount of money because of the way that money worked and how rich the emperors were. Often it'd be like a year's wages as a bonus. Now, we will get to the year of the 4 emperors in more detail later, but think about that. Think about your wages as a bonus 4 times in 1 year. Like, you got 5 times the wages in a year. That's crazy.
I mean, that's unheard of in today's world. That would be unheard of.
So the incentive is, if you've got lots of power and access to emperors, is well, if you kill them, you get a new one. You get more money. You get paid for doing it. You just don't get caught. And if they do catch you, you're an elite Roman legion. What are they going to do about it? They're going to come at you in their togas, waving their bits of paper and things like that. Yeah, just kill them and get a new one. It's like, so they had this ability and that access to be able to do that, to change things. I was on the phone to my brother earlier, and we were just talking about a few random things. We got to the subject of the CIA. Some more records have come out about the CIA and some of the wet work that they've done. But if you really think about the big thing that we were talking about with it was how much impact they have had on the world because of who they are and who they're connected to. So obviously the CIA are slightly outside of normal government channels in the US, but they are still part of the government, and the government can order them to do things and ask them, oh, wouldn't it be nice if this happened, and then turn their back on the CIA and do it for them. The Praetorians were able to do that CIA role as well, so they could impact and influence society, but because they had that power, they could get away with things that other people really, really couldn't. Even if you got yourself a big mob where you were just someone who, a demagogue type, who got people behind them to go and do these things, you're not really going to have the ability with that mob. I know the mob of Rome is a dangerous thing, but you're not going to have the ability to kill off an emperor and install your new one and everything go fine afterwards. Well, even the Praetorians didn't quite have that ability, but they did try and use that, and it sort of worked as well. They were able to do those things. I'm not saying the CIA is killing off presidents, or you can talk about the JFK stuff elsewhere, but but the mere fact that is actually a conspiracy theory that is a fairly mainstream one, that was this a CIA thing going on, and people go, pretty sure it isn't. But if it was revealed that it was, people would go, oh, right, actually, that's I wouldn't put it past them to do said thing. Praetorians, exactly the same thing. They had this influence. They could do these things. Whether they could or not, you still got that knowing that someone can do a thing. You shape your actions around them, knowing that what they could do, what power they have as well. It's simple things like you always talk nicely to a police officer, because if you start mouthing off to a police officer, they're going to think of something to arrest you for. So you talk nicely to them, and you're not going to get arrested because you know they have the power to do that.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
If a random member of the public came up and talked to you the way that some police officers do, you would just give them a string of swear words and tell them to off and get back in your car and drive away. And because you know they wouldn't be able to do anything. And it's that influence, your behaviour is then influenced by the power that they have been given in society. It's power dynamics gets into really convoluted psychological territory. But with the Praetorians, it is one of the major factors about the Praetorians that yes, they were an elite military unit, but they weren't just an elite military unit. They had all of these other things. So we've said they fitted the role of the CIA, the Secret Service, the general bodyguards, the general elite military unit. They were allowed inside Rome. They could be used in the manner that, well, for us, over here, it isn't that much different because we use the SAS over here. Like the Iranian embassy siege, for example, is the most obvious version of we will go to those people. Whereas obviously in the US, you've got specific rules about that. So it would be your high-level SWAT teams. Would be that. So they fulfill that role as well. So they are these people. And then on top of that, they've got a political role that they have to fulfill, which in modern society, elected sheriffs in the US, and for the UK, it would be our police commissioner elections as well. Is they have that role to do the thing, but there's sort of a political side to it at the same time as well. So they've got all of these roles mashed into this one thing, and it being Rome with intrigue, and they've also got swords. So things can and did go wrong more than once. Well, not wrong for the Praetorians, well, until later on, but
but now the funny thing is, Aidan, is that the Praetorian Guard was founded. The first records, first historical records, were found in 275 BC when you had the Praetorians serving the Scipio family or the Scipii family.
Yeah,
that was the earliest record of a Praetorian Guard back in the Roman Republic. But their role in the Roman Republic was pretty different from their role of the beginning of the Empire era. And there we go between the Republic and Empire eras, because in the Praetorian era they were mostly just bodyguards, and that was pretty much it, really. But then in the Empire era, they really started to gain, more of a role, and like you said, more of a political role. They had more of an influence on actual Roman society, to the point where I think there was one emperor that the Praetorians assassinated. I can't remember his name.
That's the year of the four emperors. That's when you get into Nero, Galba, and
Nero. Yes.
That's an utter mess. And this is what I've been alluding to with they had the power to do these things. It didn't always end well, and the donatives thing became a massive issue with it. That they were promised money. That's why Galba, they killed Galba as well, because he was promised money, and then he turned around and went, I don't pay for my troops, they should just like me. And they turned around and went, no, we like to get paid, and stabbed him to death. No, they stabbed him to death. They may have hung him. There was a lot of people being hung at that point as well. It became sort of the thing. There was a lot of lynch mobs going around, but you get this situation where they've got the political power. See, the other thing with the Praetorians is, if the Roman Emperor was doing crazy stuff,
right,
it meant they had to do more work. They didn't want to do the extra work. No one wants to do the extra work for the same amount of pay. That's just a human thing. So they didn't want. So it was in their best interest to keep the decent ones alive, and if you had a crap one, to get rid of him, because they want stability. If there's more money, they're more likely to be given more money because it's more prosperous. They can then make more money out of it, and their status is then greater. Whereas if they're running around doing, you think the Marius and Sulla years, like if you're running around killing civilians left, right, and centre, no one's going to like you.
Yeah, right.
And it's like the phrase "I'm following orders" doesn't really cut it ever. It's never cut it as well. It's the most ridiculous thing. But they needed to look at, and this is where the politics comes into it. They need to look like they're protecting the emperor. They also need to look like they're protecting Rome as well, which is something obviously they thought about, because if the emperor's doing bad things, then they can always pull out the line, I'm not here to protect the emperor, I'm here to protect Rome and the idea of the emperor, and then they can stab the emperor and get a new one. It was when they got too greedy that was a problem, when they were like, who do we want as emperor next? Like, let's just auction the position. And they literally held an auction. It's like, really, this isn't going to end well. There was I don't know if they ended up getting decimated at the end of that as well. I know a load of them got disbanded and some demoted and sent to other legions and moved around the empire as well. They got completely dismantled and rebuilt after all of that fracas because they got too political. Mm-hmm. There's only so political you can get without it all going to crap. So
now I found a cool little snippet while I was looking around, snooping around. It says as we've established, the Praetorians made more than what normal legionnaires, but now that there's records that show how much a normal legionnaire made per year. They made around 250 denarii, while Praetorians made 375 denarii, and then later on, Domitian later emperors increased the payment to 1,500 denarii per year, and I also found a cool little tool that converts denarii into modern currency. So I want to pull that up for you here. Let's pull that up here. Now I don't know how accurate it is, but let's have a little fun with it. So if you were to convert 375 denarii into British pounds, you get about 24.46 quid. In today's money. If you take 375 denarii, now in American money, that's more like it's about $31 in American money. So that's about how much a Praetorian made before the NATO emperors. But now, if you take the NATO emperors, they pay about 1,500 denarii. That's about $123 in American money, and in British, it's about close to 100, about 98 quid.
Yeah, which is obviously with the economic situation at the moment, wages have gone up. But say about 2 or 3 years ago, that's about your average worker's daily wage now, before taxes and things like that. That's what you see on your. If you got paid for a day, that's a half decent wage to get per day. And so, let me work this out. And
then if you were to convert it into Indian, now if you were to convert 1,500 into Indian rupees, you get about 10,005 in Indian rupees. So
rupees are insane. They've got special words for when you get into the different types of thousand in rupees, because while you use a lot of rupees for it, it's the same as in Thailand as well. They'll talk about like millions for a house, and that'll be a cheap house. But they've actually got special words, specific words for the different, like we'd have thousands and millions. Or I think it's probably a little bit closer to where Cockney rhyming slang has different words for different amounts of money as well. Often, obviously, now commonly used by drug dealers because it's easier than actually saying specific amounts. But it's along those types of things. It's quite interesting. But one of the things to think about as well is the amount of money that you'd get. That's your basic salary. Obviously, the salary, there's the whole salt connection and everything. They would also get, along with that, a bunch of other things as well. So I think if you were in the military, you get paid. They'd also give you your uniform, which is you're wearing every day. I mean, most workplaces would give you a uniform, and you don't have to pay for it, or in the UK at least. And so you've got that. You've then got, say, if you're in the military, they will feed you in the military. Different militaries do it slightly differently, depending on what role you're doing and where you're stationed and things like that. Sometimes you would have to pay, sometimes not. Over here, if you live in housing on base, you don't have to pay water, but you still pay your electric and gas. Don't know if that's changed. That was quite a few years ago since I've ever looked into that. So you have these sort of like extra benefits when you're in the military, where the pay often looks lower than your civilian, but a civilian will have to pay for all of these other things that you wouldn't really think of. And so I think the military uniform includes your boots. I've worked in very few jobs, unless you're working somewhere that you have to have steel toe cap boots, you supply your own footwear. Very few places supply footwear, which obviously is one of the biggest clothing expenses is footwear, whereas the military doesn't have to have that. So it's these little bits that they get also, it's you think about what they have to pay for. If they don't have electricity, so they have to pay for that. They don't have gas, so they don't have to pay for that. They don't have internet, so they don't have to pay for that. They don't. Well, they don't have Netflix, and that wasn't around. So they don't have all of these other things that we have. That all you're really buying then is your food, and even then there's a lot of barter going on. As a soldier, as I said, so you're given a certain amount of basic stuff you can eat in the mess, and that's essentially free or basically nothing. It's your we have your mess fees over here in the UK where you pay them every so often. And I can't remember exactly how it worked, but essentially you get certain things for free and certain things cheap and stuff like that. It'd be like being a member of a club, really. But
yeah,
they had back then their expenditure was a lot less. Housing, they didn't have to pay for housing, did they? As well. So when you think about it, you think, oh, that's not much. So one of the ways to do it is you compare it for what the person needed to purchase. House prices are often a good one as well, because you think once you're done with your being in the military, you would think to go and buy a house. And if you compare that against yearly wages as well, obviously we've all seen a lot of that over the last few years since the Great Recession, as well, with the boom in house prices and the not boom in wages, and the disparity between the two. And that's often seen if you look at historical stuff as well. If you look at the house prices, and this is the thing that I was saying about they're living near Rome. The houses were more expensive in Rome. It's like you go and move to your capital city, the houses are more expensive. You go and live somewhere rural, your house is cheaper. And they don't even have to worry about the services being less out there because no one has services unless you lived in Rome, and then obviously, or a major city where you had your aqueducts, and then in Rome you had the grain dole if you were too poor. It's the Roman benefit system, obviously. So you the bathhouses as well. In Rome they had the free bathhouses for the poor, whereas obviously you'd pay your club fees to get into a nicer one, and so on and so
yeah,
forth.
right. Mm-hmm.
And it's so you think about the money that they got. There's what they're really looking at is that money goes further if the empire is stable. So if the empire is stable, food prices aren't going to fluctuate. If you don't have a war, that means the government aren't buying up all of the food to send out to the soldiers, which means there's more food on the market. Basic economics, food is therefore cheaper.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So you get abundance. So it's in their best interest to keep the empire as stable as possible. If you have an emperor who isn't doing crazy things, then people have confidence in the market. Same as today. If you don't have a prime minister or a president doing crazy things, then the market tends to be relatively stable. And it's one of the very interesting things about politics, just all across history, and even to this modern day. Everyone, for your country to work the best, you have to have the most boring person in charge. The best person is a boring accountant.
Yes.
So John Major, for us, it's one of the things is he was known as the grey man. He was the most boring accountant person ever. But actually, he was really good for running the country. He didn't have long enough for his ideas to come to fruition. We're not going to get into that. That's weird 90s British politics. But and the thing about it is he was concentrating on making the country run. He wasn't concentrating on getting all these people to vote for him. Whereas obviously we're seeing it a lot more now with politicians. Well, look at the US presidential races. We could follow them over here. We can go down betting shops and bet on outcomes of your politics. It's like it's become such a spectacle of a thing. And that's what happened in Rome as well. It's exactly the same thing in Rome, where you had this whole spectacle when times got a little bit tougher. If you had all these different people coming up and you're like, oh, are you supporting this person, you're supporting that person? And then obviously we've talked later with the Byzantines, with the Blues and the Greens. And then we've talked about the whole Marius and Sulla thing before, of which side you're on. And a good example, the HBO Rome series. That shows it really nicely of political machinations, and you were in a gang that supported one side or the other side. And it wasn't a gang like a street gang that you think of today. Well, they were initially like that. In times of politics, it ended up more like proper supporters, paid up members of political parties who went out and said that and helped on the campaign trail, those types of people as well. So it's quite interesting that it's all throughout history. We need the most boring person. We all kind of want the most boring person. We all vote for the most crazy person ever because we just want some interest in politics. Otherwise, it's just dull and we don't pay attention.
It's just dull, but there's nothing to talk about. But yet, sometimes the best thing is to have nothing to talk about. It's crazy. Now,
ironically, with the Praetorians, just quickly, ironically with the Praetorians, their whole ethos was making sure that they had this person who just did things and it all worked, and they protected that. That was part of their job. Obviously, it's the Secret Service. Yet they were so involved in putting these crazy people into power and then messing up the whole system, left, right, and centre, because I could get an extra bonus this year if we did this. It's like, why? Why are you doing this? Absolutely mental.
Yeah. Now let's go into the crazy time period known as the Year of the Four Emperors, because that's where the Praetorians really got involved. The Praetorians managed to get they were managed. The new colleague of Tincinus managed to get the Praetorian Guard to abandon Nero in favor of the contender Galba. Yeah. So it was not a I'm going to stab you in the back. Oh, then you're going to stab me in the back. I'm going to stab you in the back. It was just all this backstabbing. It's like a really bad episode of a comedy gone wrong. That was the Year of the Four Emperors in a nutshell.
It's but I always think of it as if you watch, say, the soap operas,
yes,
the UK ones, like something like EastEnders. You're like, so many people die. It's like every year at Christmas, someone's got to die. And then it'll be a dun dun dun, who did it type of thing for the next 2 months. Something important's got to happen, because this goes back to the interesting of, you don't just want to watch people doing their own boring normal lives. I know it's the age of the internet, people do that. That's bizarre. But people want to see interest, so those shows focus on those things. The Year of Four Emperors, they didn't have those boring bits. It was all this messed up bit.
Yeah.
And I don't know why no one has made a film of this. It's like a follow-up to the HBO Rome series could be the Year of the Four Emperors. Think how good that would be. I mean, it starts off with Nero, for God's sake. Like, it starts off with Nero. Like, what most mental character could you think of? Nero. There we are.
Carnegie was a close second.
Yep. All these amazing personalities through that as well, and all of the intrigue as well. The Tudors as well. It was that time when we had all of those. The Tudors, there was so much of that political intrigue, and everyone was so focused on it. Game of Thrones, exactly the same thing. It's based on a lot of these political machinations between people in power. This could be there's this whole bit of history which is actually relatively well known. Sort of, if people know about Roman history, they'll know about the Year of the Four Emperors. That's one of the main things that people know about. And it's how, as you said, it's how the Praetorians really it's where people see them in history, is what they were messing up during that time as well.
Right.
I think there should be a series, at the very least a series, if not a film or a film series. We can create an epic. You can have a Lord of the Rings length epic of that. You can do 4 films, one of each of the emperors. It'd be fantastic. I mean, one of those films would be. One of the emperors is in for like 21 days. He's like 3. He didn't even make the month as well. That's how unstable the empire was, and how much the Praetorians were doing, because their camp was just outside Rome itself. So there was lots of back and forth between Rome with them. They closed off their camp, especially when they did the auction in that year. They closed it off. It's on Wikipedia. It should have. Yeah, they were bribing. So you got Galba, got Otho. Yeah, and there was like, even in the cohorts themselves, and then that's when they got then disbanded for causing that chaos. and then they got put back together again afterwards, but they got rid of all the ones they didn't like and then just kept all the ones they did like and then filled it back up again to get the thing. So it's like it's absolutely the stuff that they did. It's you could have it as a political career. It's like you watch. Trying to think of a good example now, but generally, if you watch any like military film, there'll always be that colonel or that general. And they're there for the politics. They're not there for the soldiering. They're always there for the politics. And there's the Praetorians here in Four Emperors. That's what they got to. That's what they were doing. It's like, yeah, we're not here to do the soldier side of things. We've got uniforms. But what we're actually here to do is to just cause utter chaos and get as much money as we can before the gravy train runs out.
Yeah, it was crazy. Then I'm over here reading the Wikipedia. The Praetorians were they did a whole lot of things, and they really survived until the 4th century. They survived all the way up to the 4th century before they were disbanded by, ironically, Constantine the Great was the one who kind of disbanded the Praetorians.
So it's because Constantine was all about creating a stable empire, which is ironically he was after he went back on Diocletian's reforms to make a stable empire, but he disbanded them because he realized he did that much chaos.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but it's ironic that we mentioned Diocletian because another Romans considered him boring.
Exactly. Yeah. The man who farmed cabbages, but he was one of the best emperors of the whole lot. He saw what needed to be done. He went in, he did it, and then he went and farmed his cabbages again, and then became emperor again when they all messed it up. And then they got messed up again, and he was like, "Nah, too old for this." Like, you just crack on and leave me to it.
I think the problem is, Aidan. I'll tell you what the problem is, and it's not just us. It's historians in general. We love the crap stories. We love the shit show because it makes for a wonderful story. Even us historians. Let's face it, Aidan. I mean, don't you think Carnegie and O'Neill makes for the best story to tell?
Exactly. Well, we just look at everything we've said. So far, we've done a heavy focus on the Year of the Four Emperors, which is probably some of the worst Praetorian Guards that they ever had. The chaos that they've absolutely caused. And the series that I really want to see is one of the worst bits of the Roman Empire falling apart. So, give a second. But there you've got this whole situation. As you say, we focus on it's not quite great man theory. It's the concept of it's the interesting bits. People learn about the boring bits. When they learn about the interesting bits and look out more, they'll pick up the boring bits as well. But you don't hook someone going, here's a list of Diocletian's reforms. And the price of lettuces in Hispania. It's like no one cares.
And it makes sense because one of my favorite people to study in Roman history was Scipio Africanus, the one who defeated Carthage. The Punic Wars. But yet, the funny thing is, I don't think you would have liked to live in the Punic Wars, going to war, knowing that one arrow could have went into your stomach and you would have been a dead duck.
Yeah, exactly. So even when the Punic Wars were going well, I would think of the US in the 70s during the Vietnam War. It was almost like that at the end when they were winning, let alone when they were losing. It's these crazy bits of history that make it very, very interesting, and it's the old adage or insult, as it were. May you live in interesting times. It's like no, we don't like living in the interesting times, but we certainly like looking at the interesting times.
Yeah,
history. But it's really telling and obviously Constantine did a lot of military reforms. This is where we started to get into the legions being reformed into your commititents and your libertanii, so your border forces and then your mobile armies, because it was just times had moved on. That just wasn't how it was going to work anymore. So the Roman military has always done that, as we've talked about. They went from the hoplites to the early legion to the imperial legions, as we saw, and even the later imperial legions were, before they moved on to what we think of as a more medieval style army. Even then, they were very different to the earlier incarnations of them that is technically still in the same Marian reform bracket. You have, with that, obviously, the Praetorian Guard needs to go at some point. The Varangians is what you end up with the Byzantines having instead of the Praetorian Guard. The Praetorian Guard never make a comeback after that. But the Varangians, if you look at them, they did have certain influence on politics, but it was more subtle, the way that they had their influence on politics. You had to have them on side. If you wanted to have a coup, you had to make sure they were on your side. But they weren't the people instigating the coup, whereas the Praetorians would be the people instigating the coup. They would certainly go out. If they saw an opportunity, they would bloody take it as well. But if you look at the societally for the Romans, going and serving in the military as well was a thing that you had to do as part of your upbringing. You look at, say, Britain in the imperial years, especially look at around the First World War. We had our entire upper class society was completely destroyed by the First World War, because it was, you joined up as an officer to defend your country. That's what you were expected to do. And then you fought from the front because that's what you're expected to do. But as soon as people crack out machine guns, that ain't working anymore, and you're all just dying. So you ended up with a lot of this upper class dying because of that. But that ethos was very much in the Roman Empire. Now, if you didn't want to go into the very dangerous situation, you could always join the Praetorian Guard to get your military bit in for the Honorium Crucis. I still haven't looked up exactly how to say it, but what we talked about before, where you had to hit these certain levels to become a politician of certain levels. Being part of the being a tribune, a military tribune, or being part of the military and having that military background was a really important part of doing that and moving up the politics. If you wanted to remain in the politics of Rome and be in the military, the Praetorian Guards. It's a no-brainer if you want to do that, because they're not. Yeah, they would go to battlefields occasionally, but it's the equivalent of, say, a modern-day politician. You get it a lot in the US, where there's a big thing about who served in the military,
right,
as well, especially with the age of the politicians as well, because that obviously encompasses the Vietnam War era, where it was a very big thing of who did and didn't, and why they did or didn't. And you had the people that actually went out for. You got your people like John McCain, for example, he went and he did his military part, and he had a military career that you would expect of someone in the military. You get other politicians that were in the military at the time and did their service, but they were, I can't remember their name now. They were pretty open about it. They're like, yeah, I was in the military, because everyone was. I had a desk job in the US. I was behind a desk in a uniform. It's not exactly the same as going to the front line and flying planes and shooting a rifle. Yeah, I was trained to do some of that thing, but that's not what I was doing. But yeah, the whole point of it is they did their part. They were supposed to be in the military, so they joined the military and they did their time in the service. And they were honest about, yeah, well, I didn't go to the front line, but I was still part of an essential part of the military, because that's what I had to do. That's what I was supposed to do. And that's what the Romans are looking for. So if you joined the Praetorian Guard and you sat outside Rome making loads of money and political connections, that's no worse than being on Hadrian's Wall, or the front lines in Germania, or out trying to fight the Persians, or dying against the Persians was quite common. That's not if I was in the Roman military, I would not have wanted to be on the Persian front.
No,
it's like it was hot, it was dusty, and the chances of you getting shot before you could get anywhere close to the enemy was so high. At least in Britain, you had it was like relatively quiet, or there was a battle. There wasn't much of like, oh, look, I'm going to wander around. We'll go over here to the city. No, we're dead again. No. Yeah, absolutely mental. But you didn't have to do that if you joined the Praetorians, because you joined the military. So you've done your military service. So, tick in the box. and I get to carry on my political career at the same time, which I think was part of their problem as well. They were just too close to it. If they'd have moved the Praetorian headquarters away from Rome, put it somewhere different. So, for example, if we had in the UK, if we had, say, our Praetorian Guard for the king, and we had them based at, say, based in Birmingham, for example, that's far enough away that they're not intimately in now. Obviously, things are different these days. But in the Roman Empire, it'd be like putting a Praetorian Guard at, say, Ravenna, rather than having them in near Rome, because then you'd have to go somewhere to be in the Praetorian, and you'd have to be on rotation into Rome. That would have cut all of that out as well. I mean, obviously, Constantine just went the whole hog and got rid of them, but they were setting themselves up to fail, really. It's like standard Roman Empire things. This is a brilliant idea. What will we do? What we can do is we can add political intrigue and lots of people being stabbed. Let's do it. Stop it. This is how you keep going through emperors.
Now, it's another interesting fact. In the beginning of the 2nd century, they recruitment evolved to authorize the inclusion of legionnaires of the Roman army. Yeah, so so basically, even if you're just a regular legionnaire, you could join a Praetorian starting in the 2nd century, and the Praetorian could also become a cavalryman, equitate, after almost 5 years in service in the infantry. Yes, because they were Praetorian cavalry as well. That was the thing back then as well.
And this is what we were mentioning before, of how they evolved into being that, like the SAS or your SEAL Team 6, where they're drawn from the elite standard units and they're brought in from there and they can apply. And then if you spend enough time in there, you get this political position, this societal position. After you've spent time in there, it's your way to, one of the few ways to have social mobility in Rome. There was very few ways to have it over a single person, and it was one of the few was to do that. So you think how sought after that is. That you're fairly well to do, come from a fairly well to do family, but to break through to the next level, you've got to go and do something. Well, that's the exact thing you want to do, because it means you don't have to get yourself into a position where it's your son, obviously, because it's Rome, your son getting that. You can get that for yourself if you do that. So it's no wonder they had a load of people that really wanted to change things very, very quickly as well. But it's I do always wonder, because obviously with all of the things in the Year of Four Emperors, why we never really saw a military dictatorship, in the sense of like you would get a coup and it would be what Thailand's had. Like it's changed now, especially since COVID. But before that, the generals of the army were the politicians, and there were several internal coups at that top level, with having the military in charge. You had, South America's famous for it. It's constantly all over the place. It's why the Falklands War started. It was exactly that situation, that you got these top military officials controlling a country and wanting to do that. And what do they do to show that they want to do that? Well, we'll invade somewhere, because that's the thing as a general we're supposed to do, and everyone's focused on that rather than any problems at home. And it surprises me that we didn't see more Praetorians pushing through on that, gaining. Obviously, they gained political power, but you don't really see a massive, after they've started doing that, you don't see this massive change in where the consuls and the senators are coming from. It's not as if while you could use being in the Praetorians for social mobility, it's not as if you could use it for social mobility to make yourself a senator. Because if it was that easy to skip around the system, everyone would have been doing it, and all the senators would have been ex-Praetorians. But you didn't have this. And it's very weird that never really happened, that they stuck to in the shadows stuff as well, apart from obviously a few moments where they came out and actually actively involved themselves. It was quite behind the scenes what they were doing. Which goes back to what I was saying before about that's the CIA element to it as well. They've got that power, but you don't see. It's like how many presidents are ex-CIA?
Right.
You just don't see it.
Yeah, it just you just don't.
Not that they would tell you, but
yeah, right. Well, we're getting very close to the end of the episode.
Oh,
yeah, I know. We're 55 minutes in. Yeah, this was the time just went by quick.
Absolutely cracking topic as well.
Yep. There was one more thing I wanted to talk about, but I forgot. Oh, the equipment. Yes, the Praetorian equipment. Because you remember if you remember back in Roman military, the military you got was based on what you could afford. So
the original coming from the Greek city-state concept, and then later on the Byzantines did the same thing.
Yeah, the Praetorians obviously got the best armor, the best everything. They had to be the best. And I gotta tell you though, Aidan, the Praetorian outfits I see, they're fire. They're really good. Yeah, I would love to see myself in one of those uniforms for sure. You know, with the purple shield and all that. Yeah, I gotta admit that's fucking hot.
It's the scene in Gladiator where the one right at the end where Commodus is all in white, which is fantastic as it is. He actually looks like a marble statue. And then contrasted against the Praetorians, all in their lacquered black with the purple shields and obviously the purple cloaks and things as well. It's like everyone looks good in that scene. It's so good. Obviously, it's a film. There are concessions to on-screen things. But yeah, that's what your Praetorians basically look like. And quite frankly, always how they used to recruit in the 1800s, wasn't it? Do you want this really nice, fancy uniform? Yeah, we'll join the military and you can have one. It's like, yeah, I'd have joined the Praetorians if I got that weapon and armor set. Yeah, 100%. I do like purple. It's my favourite colour, after all.
Yeah, I love the idea of wearing purple. It's so royal. Yeah, I'll knock a few heads for that. Yeah, so.
What do you mean? I get extra pay and get to kill off the odd emperor? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, why not? I might take out that brute. Yeah. I want to take out that brute. Yeah, so. Yeah, lots of interesting things. But anyway, we have reached the end of the podcast. So, Mike, Mike, we like to do with every episode to close out. I want to ask Aidan, where can everybody find you and what you've been up to lately?
So, as always, Aidan Coyler Cartography is where you can find me. AC Cartography on Drive-Thru-RPG. They're my main places. Obviously, you can find my book stuff. As always, I am really lax at updating that, whether I'm doing things or not. So, one thing I am doing, and we haven't actually mentioned yet on the podcast, is the charity anthology as well. So I have been writing, and I've been writing a short story for our charity anthology that we are running.
Yes.
We will eventually be talking about it more, but that's a sneak peek, as it were, of what we're doing and what we'll be up to. But yeah, watch this space.
Yeah, watch this space, right. Yeah, for me, obviously I'm working on Frogs and Margaritas. That's my newest horror book that just came out for pre-order. Right now I'm still editing it. I'm getting beta readers to read it. I'm going to take this week off from doing anything because, man, I need the rest. I've been working my butt off. But I will be working on a story set in ancient Greece or in the Minoan Empire for the horror anthology, for the anthology you were just talking about. So, yes, I'll be working on the story as well. So, if you guys like my writing, I'm going to be in that anthology to be made, and I'm excited, man. It's for a good cause as well. So I look forward to seeing what you've got come up with, and I think we got a bunch of authors already joining us. Correct?
Yeah, we've got quite a few people in, and really, Lee's been doing great, chatting to different authors and getting them really invested in the project as well. So it's going to be brilliant with the lineup that it looks like we're getting. It's going to be a really fun read and historical as well. So very apt for this podcast.
Yeah, I watched the space. Yeah, we'll have more details as we get closer. But for now, this has the end of this episode, and next week, I think we should be. I got a good topic for next week. The Janissaries of the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah, yes. That's an interesting topic.
Yeah, Janissaries.
We could also talk about Dracula if we're talking about Janissaries.
Yeah, Janissaries, yeah.
which I will talk about in the next episode.
Janissaries, that came up because it's one of my favorite units in Age of Empires 2, the Janissaries. Yeah, so we'll talk about how they came up in the adventure of gunpowder and all that good stuff. So yeah, we're going to the gunpowder era next week, next Saturday. So until then, this has been the Age of Warfare podcast. I'm Praetoria Maximus. That's Negate Aidan Coyler. And we will see you next week. Until then, take care, guys.
Take care.